of CRY, what you discovered is pretty much what we all discover in every sector. There are so many committed business leaders. There are so many committed people in governments. In the United Nations, we care, we join because we care, we want to make a difference. What doesn't happen is that we don't connect with concrete templates and tools in our everyday planning, in our implementation.
Yes,
what
absolutely.
we need, how we connect our universal values of dignity, equity, compassion into our strategies and have them, really designed to make that difference. And Pervin, your sharing from CRY is so vital because, I was reading, everybody's read that book. I think many activists have read the book by Paul Hawken, Blessed Unrest, and he talks about 2 million committed CEOs in NGOs. Can you imagine what would happen if they could see what you see and they could bring in what you are bringing in right now? Because this is so vital. How do we transform our institutions and our governance processes such that we are able to manifest universal values as we change systems and we change norms? We don't change them just from a mindset. We change them from a mindset that embodies those values. And it's a joyful space. Great.
Yes.
Great, Pervin. You were talking about applying this in other areas. What are those areas?
Well, I think the other area really is, so I think for me, this learning that I had from my work in CRY was something that therefore I was able to bring in, because after my stint in CRY, I've broadly been involved in, both consulting with organizations and on boards. I serve on a couple of boards in India of other organizations working in different areas. But this insight really has influenced the way I also see my board role, because I realize that boards have a huge role to play in contributing to the strategic direction of the organization. While the organization itself and the founders and the progenitors, they're the ones with the passion and the, vision and the heart for what they're doing. But I think when on the board, you have this role to support them and to provide basic direction in a sense and input into how that heart can be translated in a way that can truly bring about transformational change. And so therefore, in a sense, that's a role that I've seen for myself also on the various boards, whether it's been with Dream a Dream, an organization working with children and young people who come from very, very adverse backgrounds, whether it's been in my work with Citizens for Peace, working on issues of justice, on issues of peace, and working, to counter this whole fundamentalism and this polarization that's there in society. All that that's in my work that I continue to do on the board with CRY, is to say, how do we bring and integrate the values that we stand for and that which we wish to embody, and how do we actually translate that into direct action, that it affects every aspect of the work, not just what we do internally in terms of what are the values that we will uphold within our HR practices or our financial accountability practices, but actually how is it going to translate into every single element of program on the ground. And I think the second dimension of that is also this whole aspect of rights. I think one of the most powerful for me, I think, takeaways of this framework was really giving me a completely different way to look at rights. Because up until then, rights was very much in the work, and a lot of human rights organizations doing incredible work. But still, the work is located in the middle circle. It's located in the space of isms or ideologies, or if there's rights, then there has to be you're fighting against somebody. So it's a kind of a binary. There's a binary there, it's us versus them. And I think that always left me troubled, because for me, my belief has always been that if we're working to look at transformation in the world, then we're looking to enroll all stakeholders. And sometimes those stakeholders might actually be currently in a space of violating a set of rights, but there is always space, because if we look at the person, we said we don't agree with your action, but there's a possibility to enroll you from the space of your values and maybe create a space for you to look at your actions differently and change. I mean, that's the whole idea of transformation. That people have the capacity to transform from how they saw something to how they see something today, or do something differently. And I think this framework, which was saying that if we start from the space of our values, we believe in justice, dignity, inclusion, and we recognize that there is that space of oneness and that all of us are connected there. And even the person that might be on the other side from a middle circle point of view, but believes deeply about something, there's a space to connect and maybe find a new way of delivering those rights in a way that truly transcends these isms and ideologies. So I think that was the second part that really has, for me, has come into the work that I do on our boards. And I think more specifically, talking of Citizens for Peace, which is an organization really that is at the heart of looking at how do we deal with issues of polarization currently, conflict, violence, and where, in a sense, the conversations have become so polarized and so extreme almost that there doesn't seem to be space for just compassionate conversations, transformational conversations. And I think that when we looked at, very specifically, I can share one example of a workshop that we designed around an initiative called Peace Talks, which was to bring people together, create a space for people to have civil conversations, and conversations that could actually bring about new possibilities. Conversations that could open up spaces to see things differently, perhaps, to think about things differently. And we actually, in that workshop, we had people who came from just every possible kind of background. It was around peace and identity, and therefore people representing different identity groups, whether they were religious, whether they were marginalized, whether they were caste, people from different castes, people from extreme left and right, organizations, majority, minority community groups. And it was a collection of people who had never been in the room, in one room in the way that they were at that point. And I think traditionally, if we had gone about it with the traditional kind of design, it would have become a space of either debate or discussion or, even a lot of argument. It could have become quite fractious in a sense. But instead, we designed it using the Radical Transformational Framework. And we said, let's start with the space of what we stand for and what are our values and what is it we wish to embody in the world. And, it was palpable when we started that meeting. When we finished that first session, in the room, there was this palpable sense of a very deep connect. And for the first time, there were people who were coming from the lower caste and upper caste, and there were people coming from the Muslim community and the Hindu community and the Christian community, and there was this sense of connect. And all the conversations really flowed from there. And therefore, for the first time, people listened very deeply to each other in what they had experienced of, whether it was violations and what they had experienced of oppression, in what they had experienced of being excluded. And I think at the end of those 2 days, it was just 2 days, and yet in those 2 days, something shifted so fundamentally in people, that they were able to take away and recognize that there is that very deep space, the Ubuntu space, that space of oneness. And in that space, I can actually listen to the other who was so different from me, or who I thought I had nothing in common with, and find common ground of our humanity. And therefore say, okay, what new possibilities can emerge today for this, again, for compassionate collaborative, transformational action, that can actually, that where we can look at embodying peace and justice and equity and inclusion,
Yeah, Pervin. In fact, the points you raise, the fact that the world today is so divided based on religion, based on politics, based on class, based on, in India, caste, based on race. We are divided, our identities are embedded in social constructs that are actually not compassionate. And, the amazing thing about human beings is when we allow ourselves to touch our inner greatness, what we stand for, then our mind is informed from that space. And we become willing to transform our opinions, our stereotyping of other people, our exclusion of others. And yes, even in a short time, we can deepen that space and then find new ways of collaboration, new ways of generating synergy in our partnerships for different results. Absolutely. Thank you so much. You already touched on it, but it would be great to hear a couple of examples of what actually shifted in the norms and patterns through the work that you've done in all these dimensions, whether it's Citizens for Peace or the choir or your governance role or Sensar, or just a couple for the listeners so that we concretize what you've shared and inspired us with.
So I think in my, from the governance point of view, one of the boards that I've worked on was the Zensar Foundation. So Zensar is a technology company. It's a corporate company. It's a technology company. And they have a foundation that was looking at, basically looking at addressing issues of urban poverty around there, where they were located in a city called Pune in India. And when I came on, at that point in time, they were doing, basically programs. They were running digital literacy programs, an English program, a healthcare program. So it was very programmatic and kind of relief-oriented, direct delivery kind of work. And one of the things that they were keen on was, they were very keen that their employees got involved. So their employees would go out, volunteer, maybe a couple of times, etc. And so I had just, in fact, it was during my time at working with you at TIS, Monica. And so it was so fresh for me, the transformational leadership framework. And so I took it there and I said, look, if we really want to look at getting employees engaged and want to look at doing work that's, deep, lasting and transformational, then we need to look at this from the point of view of how do we build and how do we create a way in which people can actually lead change. Whether it's your employees, they can be change makers. They don't just have to volunteer 2 hours. They can be change makers in whatever they do. Whether it's the community, whether it's the children, can we really see the idea of each one basically leading, and discovering their agency both as individuals and as communities to lead change. The rest of the board actually agreed with that. And so therefore the program really, our entire work shifted in a sense from this very kind of programmatic inner circle work to saying, okay, how do we look at creating transformation, systems transformers? And if you look at the work today, and that's about now over 4 years, today, that work, our employees are actually, they're part of actually leading. They've been leading change in the community. They're community leaders that have emerged that are now leading change in different areas, whether it's in the economic development program, whether they're looking at how are they looking at issues of digital literacy and ensuring that everybody has access to the digital world in a sense that can transform from an economic paradigm. More specifically, the transformation that has happened with young people and the children from an English class. from just learning English. Today, English was really an entry point for them discovering their own agency, their own inner capacity. And these